CSR and Apresh for pulling us all together, and delighted to have my co-panelists Kamal Bali from Volvo Group, Anurag from Capgemini, and Venkat from FIS Global to discuss, I think, one of the most debated, discussed topics around in the country today, I think probably post-COVID, in terms of, how do we ensure economic opportunities for our young people in the country by skilling, by employment, and by entrepreneurship? How do we make sure that we are here, that we together as a community can tap into the unlimited potential of young people that exists, and make sure that the demographic dividend that we are talking about really becomes a massive dividend for the country and for each of our young people families. Until date, well, we've had several, pockets of excellences or islands of excellence. We as a country have not been able to crack this at scale in every nook and corner of our country. And especially coming from a CSR standpoint, where a large part of the CSR budget is looking at this dividend and what we can do. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, to hear from all of you and to add to the ideas on what we can do together as a collaborative, as a collective, as a community. What have worked, what has not worked in the past, and what should action for 2021 look like? Especially if you were to look at outcomes that we can generate, that we need to generate for more than about 100 million youth who are slated to enter the workforce in this decade. And with that, I just wanted to probably just get the conversation going. We'll do a couple of rounds of discussions amongst us and pick up on your points, and then we'll probably take the last 10-15 minutes for a discussion on questions by the audiences. So if I can just start off by each one of you, probably giving a quick background of the work that you've done in this space, and your reflections on building resilience for in the country, especially for our young people to kind of grab the opportunities that the world throws up with both their hands. I think it'll be great to get started. So should we just get started with you, Kamal?
Yeah, sure, Madan. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to be here. Madan, sorry I missed out on the last one, but glad to be here. I think you have always set up very important imperatives and interesting topics where we all can contribute. Let me share my perspective over the next 4 to 5 minutes, Madan, on this whole thing. I have 4 or 5 points to make here. I think just to set the context from my point of view, and as well as what we can do together. So one, I think India needs jobs. Very, very clearly, India needs jobs, and the economy needs skills. I think that's the very, very clear paradigm, because as you rightly said, there is a growing young population, need to create 100 million jobs over the next 8 to 10 years. There is a $10 trillion economy ambition. Of course, we also have 50% dropouts prior to secondary education, and minimal formal skilling landscape that exists in the country. That's the first point I wanted to make. So just to set the context. At the other end, the jobs that are getting created, especially over the last 3 to 4 years, let me take a span of last 3 to 4 years, require new and emerging skills. And this is thanks to digitalization and the growth of digital trade, connectivity and automation, need for solutions and not products. That's what the customers, more and more customers want solution and not really the products. Realignment of global value chains. And this is really a very good news, which I will talk about a little later, and which is thanks to the pandemic. And then the growth of asset-light business models, and which you are the best person to talk about, and the growing need to collaborate, work in platforms, and innovate. I think as a consequence of these, the jobs that are getting created are very different from what they were created 5 years ago. So that's the second point. The third point is that, and which is a very important point, is a very significant and serious shift to sustainable ways of doing things, to holistic sustainability. Earlier, sustainability was more of a lip service. Today, if you do not meet certain sustainability milestones and guidelines, you will be out of business. For instance, whatever you do, it has to be environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, economically viable, and ethically correct. So if you don't tick those 4 boxes, you are out. So I think that's the third piece which I wanted to set. The fourth piece which I wanted to share was that this pandemic, fortunately for us, for India, has opened up a never before opportunity when it comes to manufacturing. Just imagine that in 2018, and I'm sure the numbers are same even now, China accounted for 30%. Just one country accounted for 30% of the global manufacturing output, which is about $15 trillion. And India accounted for just 3%. Let me not even compare 3. But fortunately, it's very, very clear now over the last 1 year that about $4.6 trillion of global manufacturing output will get rebalanced over many countries. Now, this is a never before opportunity for India. What would have happened over the next 15 years can now happen over the next 3 to 4 years. India can double its manufacturing output from $400 billion to $1 trillion over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, here is where we will need those trained, skilled manpower. And this is really opening up to me the biggest floodgates for skilling and for jobs opportunity if we get it right. And I think the government by and large is making the right steps in terms of ease of doing business, cost of doing business. That's a separate thing as to how we become competitive in manufacturing. So all these and many more are opening up significant opportunities. And as you rightly said, very serious imperatives as well. If we don't get it right, it will become a demographic nightmare. And if we get it right, it will become a demographic big advantage to India. So I think, therefore, it's a compelling and imperative and opportunity that all of us, the government, industry, society, academia, we all work together, because getting growth back is non-negotiable, but not without addressing the prisms of protecting lives and livelihoods, prioritizing on health, skills, balancing physical and digital systems, rural-urban balancing, and looking at the future of jobs and social skill. So I will stop here, and then of course over this next one I will like to talk about as to what we are doing at Volvo, what 200 Swedish companies intend to do in India through some program, and what we all can probably partner and do together. So I will stop there for the sake of time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kamal, for setting the context so well with the 4 very relevant points that you made. You know, it was interesting, a couple of weeks ago, I was in a village near Mandya, and I met a 10th standard kid who was talking to me about AIM-L. And I was wondering, what is AIM-L? And he was saying, sir, something new that is coming and I want to understand more. And I couldn't for a while fathom what he was talking about AIM-L. Then I realized he was talking about AI-ML.
Right.
And I was saying, so where did you hear about this? He says, no, some WhatsApp forward came and my father was telling me, he's a farmer, but he says, in not just in farming, but I want you to start learning about all this and stuff like that. So I think that aspiration that young people have to be a part of the mainstream discussion, especially when we look at the rural-urban side of the things as well. And how do we make all of these to be available to every young person, every nook and corner of India is a critical aspect to bring upon as well. And maybe that's something that we can touch upon as we go forward. So with that, maybe should I, Kumar, Anurag, should we, have you come in and then we can get to Venkat.
Did you all leave anything for me to say?
No.
There are few things which was very interesting when Kamal was talking about on the way the jobs are changing, and I was thinking that when jobs are changing, are we really changing the way we are responding to this? You cannot handle the new job requirement by the old methods that we were employing earlier. So that's one change that we people have started thinking about, and we need to bring it as aggressively as the market is changing, as the requirements are changing. And you have rightly I'll say hit the nails when you said that the aspirations are changing. You go to different segments, you go to most marginalized people, you go to, I'd say, the society or the part of society which was excluded earlier. What digital has done over I'll say the mobiles have done is they've opened up vistas for them. They are now questioning why they are there, where they are. One, and second, they are talking about newer things which other people are talking, and they are aspiring to get that particular thing. So that's another interesting thing that's happening. Third space which I feel very strongly that COVID in number of ways taught us so many things. And one of the important things that it taught us was that never take life for granted, never take situation for granted, never take your, I'll say, your existence for granted. And in that particular sense, I always use that particular analogy to say that never take your, I'll say, approaches for granted. Never take your solutions for granted. Never take your I'll say the design for granted. They need to change. They need to change based on the kind of situation that we all are getting in. The another angle, and which is becoming these days, I'll say, a strong point during, I'll say, consultations on the whole idea of, or the need to collaborate, because there's huge amount of, I'll say, synergy that exists between people and institutions. They share values, they share the approach to work. There's a need to what is called bring people together, and these platforms act as a facilitator to bring ideas together, so that me or Madan, we can operate separately, or me and Kamal can operate separately, or me or Venkat can operate separately. But when we combine together, we bring in, I'll say, sum total is much more than the individual values that we are bringing to the table. So that's another element that's happening, and that's happening. Though the speed may be slow, but the need or aspiration is much higher compared to that. And fourth is, or I forgot about the numbers of point that I've shared, but another point that I can certainly add as part of the context is that there's a huge amount of need to link your skilling with forward and backward linkages. It cannot operate in isolation. You cannot run, you can't say that, hey, I'm going to run a skill center by setting up a skill academy, or what is called starting your online platform. But you need to also look at what's your supply line will be, where you are going to get these students from, who are these students, what kind of, I'll say, requirement that they are bringing in, what kind of aspiration that they are bringing, and then look at how you're going to engage them with the employers. What are your plans related to that? So in the skilling can't happen in isolation. And I do see networks and alliances started talking about, or started bringing in people who bring in, I'll say, values or traits which are complementary to other people, or which will add value to what actually the kind of work that's happening there. And there's a strong importance that we all need to place on that. As Kamal rightly pointed out, that automation or the digital or tech has changed the character of roles which are there, or the jobs which are there. Similarly, we need to, and this is something that I always tell my NGO friends, that they need to also change the similar to what car manufacturers or I'll say that any other manufacturers are doing, that they always after 3 years, 4 years, or even lesser than that, they overhaul their product line. They come out with a new catalog to say that these are the products that they are offering. Similarly, NGOs will have to again revisit after every 2 years to say that these are the things that they are doing. You cannot look into the hopes and aspiration of 2021 youth with the solution basket that you have, which was made or created in 1992 or 1993, or even 2001 or 2002, or even 2011 or 2012. Things have changed. The priorities have changed, and we need to change. And that's the context, or that's the background that I'll bring in there. Rest when we'll discuss about some of the work that's happening in the skilling space.
Great, thank
Over to
you.
Kamal.
I think yeah, you've kind of added a lot more dimension to the conversations as well. And this is like 2 sixes in a row, and I'm looking at Venkat now to hit the third six.
No, but you stole the thunder. You both.
But before we get to you, I just want to probably just amplify the point that you made, and maybe that's the next level of conversation on how do we. I think one very valid point from a personal experience that worked that looked at it is, how we should transform ourselves from looking at skilling as an end by itself to a means to an end, right? When the pandemic broke, and in April we were scrambling, we had about 4,000 youth in Herald High in our training centers. All of them vanished because obviously, they were not coming to centers, but we almost from the next day started getting panic calls from them saying, "Sir, there's no food at home." Right? When we were trying to call them up to say, "Hey, how will you learn?" They said, "Forget how will I learn, how will we eat?"
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And in less than a month, we had transformed into an organization that was trying to figure out where do you get rations from, how do you distribute it, which Hetela had never done in its life. And in about 3 months' time, we ended up distributing about 1 million food kits to about 10,000 plus families, right? And we had to learn everything from scratch. And as we then started working with other collaborators, we realized that social security was so important. Again, in the last 6 months, we've dispersed over 103 crores worth of social security benefits to 5,000 families. Again, in the last 15 years of our existence, formally, informally, we had never done any of these things. So one of the things that hit me hard is that don't look at that young person who's attending your course just as a resource, as somebody that you need to impart skills to. But if you expand that and take a holistic view of that person's life and say, how do you help this person get ahead in life? Then you got to create a lot more other security nets to make sure that this person goes ahead, rather than just putting blinkers on and looking at this person just as a resource, right? And I think that is a very big learning, which the forward and the backward linkages should include all of this, and that should become a part of the journey itself. So I just wanted to share that as a reflection. And Venkat, over to you.
Absolutely, Madan. Thank you. So I'll just pick it up from where you left that. So yes, pandemic, if I look back from March, April, the amount of panic we had, what's going to happen? Are we going to come out of this? What are that we are going to lose? Everything was, the list was big on the losing side. Oh, I'm going to miss this. But today, if I see the opportunities we have leveraged is tremendously large, right? So definitely those who looked at the opportunities have made advantage of this pandemic situation, right? And these topics which you have selected, skilling, employment, and entrepreneurship, is a very appropriate time. So now is the time we can reflect and see all those things. So I, coming from an IT background, for me, skilling is always a challenge, right? Technology gets obsolete within no time. So what do we skill in IT, right? I skill in a Pascal language doesn't exist anymore. I skill in a Java language. It is in the near future. It may not exist. So the kids, today's kids, what is their future career going to be? I would say that it doesn't exist today. Their career is yet to be created. So that's the way technology is emerging, right? So skilling in technology is really a challenge. So where do we skill, right? So more focus today is given on soft skills, right? So teach them on soft skill. The technology is just a byproduct sort of thing which comes for the kids, right? So in this pandemic period, when we stopped all the training, literally the training rooms were closed. These trainings were all started coming virtual. So what we found that people at home also started background training. The training session goes on and you actually train the family, not that individual itself, right? So a lot of feedbacks came from the family more than the participants. And that was a different experience altogether. So people went back to their native places, like you said, the AML story about a farmer. Many of them have gone back to their native places where they have their roots. And when they start working from them, now they see around their native actually, right? So they are all working in metros, specifically around IT guys, right? So they never get to go to the villages, right? So there are now organizations which started their full-fledged corporate offices in villages. Right? They found that it's economical, not only economical, and they're able to give back to the society because the skilled resources are there, communicating to the farmers, communicating to the villagers, and upskilling them. So when maybe 6-7 years back, when Dhirubhai Ambani told Mutti Duniya Mein, right, when he launched the Reliance Mobile, literally today it means that, right? So when somebody is having a smartphone in his hand, it's literally world in his hand, right? So today, because of this pandemic situation, right from the primary school children's, everybody's education is now through mobile. They are all becoming mobile savvy, and we are able to deliver the content much easier than the pre-pandemic stage, right? So that's the difference pandemic brought with the skills which we are now trying to grow in these regions. I'm more talking about the villages where we were not able to reach, right? So today we are able to reach. And digitalization, Kamalji and Anurag touched on that. So we did start the digitalization journey much earlier. We didn't wait for the pandemic. Right from demonetization onwards, we started our digital journey. Digital payments has been a revolution in the recent past, right? So today, people hardly go to ATMs or hardly go to bank or hardly use the instruments like check and DD. DD, I believe nobody uses now. Even checks are history now, right? So it's all digital. I am sure anyone in this panel would have last when visited a bank, you may not even remember the date when you visited a bank, right? So the future is branchless banks, right? So that it's not going to be a branch for the bank. It's already a reality, right? Micro ATMs is a reality. People go with just a fingerprint machine to a villager in the villages. It's all happening now as we speak. Just a thumbprint is enough for enabling an Aadhaar enabled payment system. He can withdraw cashes just across his doorstep. So that's where the digitalization has grown. And pandemic specifically, since everything got shut down, this opportunities increased, and now people are very savvy about digitalization because with no options list, they started practicing digitalization. I'm sure though brick and mortar cannot be removed completely, but the percentage is going to be significantly higher on the digital space for sure. And the third thing I wanted to touch, which Kamalji already touched, is on the manufacturing side. Make in India, it had a great push. Though it was started long ago, this pandemic situation forced us to really look into it hard and ensure that Make in India is getting its momentum. And already we are into it, and a lot of opportunities are opened. Foreign investments have started coming in. India has become the country to look at now that China is having its own limitations, right? So Make in India has come as a long way now. So definitely we can see that in the coming years, indigenous is going to upscale compared to all the foreign things which is going to be available here, right? So coming to entrepreneurship, that this Make in India is opening up the opportunities for our entrepreneurs, right? So the Indian entrepreneurs are going to go a long way because of these opportunities which opened in this 2020 year, right? So there has been downstreams because of the pandemic. People did suffer. But relatively, I would put that the percentage is higher on the people who gained from this pandemic. So it's like they say, right? Teach a person to fish, then giving him the fish. So that's what exactly happened, right? Now, I don't have the statistics, but if someone sees the statistics, I'm sure the entrepreneurs would have grown much more in this year 2020 compared to previous years. So with government giving the benefits on MSME, entrepreneurs basically giving the loan subsidy and stuff like that, a lot of them have stepped in, right? And a huge interest has come in the farming, right? So I have my own team members who have gone back to the villages who are doing farming as part-time now, right? So he's staying in his house, doing the day job for the organization, and he's helping his parents in the farming also. So I have multiple examples like that. People have gone back to their traditional works as well. So this is for good. So I'll speak more about what we do as an organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. I think the intersection of digital, make in India, the whole startup India, and I think is, as you said, throwing open a lot of possibilities. And I love the way you framed it, saying, let's look at what we can win rather than what we lost, because there's, if you start focusing on the silver lining, we'll see more of it. Right, and maybe 2021 is the year for the silver lining rather than the dark clouds. Right. I just want to put in another element into the mix, especially. I know it's an underlying theme across, but I firmly believe that if you want to create equitable growth and a distributed growth, which is not just dependent on the metros. In fact, there was one comment on what do we do in rural. Finally, the capability or the capacity of the formal or the organized sector to create jobs is only limited to 10-15% of the number of people who enter the workforce. Today, out of the 500 million people who are in the workforce, less than 50 million are employed by the organized sector. So how do we then ensure that for the incoming 100 million people, can we create X number of youth entrepreneurs, which could be 5 million, 10 million, who can then go on to create 5-10 jobs each? Because job creation as a lens for entrepreneurs has really not been the forte that we have seen in our MSME sector, because 95% of our enterprises, of the 68 odd million enterprises, are either solo or less than 3 people enterprises. So one of our initiatives at GAME, and also at Head and High, at OneBridge, at Yuva, where Anurag is also a part of that collective there, and we'll come to that, is how do you enable entrepreneurial mindsets as a critical 21st century skill? And how do you get entrepreneurial thinking to be embedded in every youth who's exiting any college? And what sort of opportunities can we create for them to create their own jobs? And the jobs could be in manufacturing, their own enterprises can be in digital, can be in tourism, whatever. And what kind of an ecosystem do we need to create to make local jobs available? I think this is another critical one. I mean, we definitely have the Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship. Skills development would have been probably 90-95% of the narrative than entrepreneurship so far, and I think that needs to shift very rapidly. Right? So I just wanted to add that element into the mix as we reflect on the next phase. We perhaps can go around one round and then see if you have any questions, and I would love to have each one of you reflect on your own CSR journey so far, and especially post-pandemic, how do you see your role as a corporate citizen changing, and what kind of changes do we need to use this? Do we need to use this opportunity to force some changes into the way that we've been operating so far? I'd love to get your reflections. So yeah, so do you want to? Kamal, we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I go? Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Madan, thank you. And very good comments made by the other speakers as well. Thank you very much. I think we have really expanded the width of and depth of this discussion. Thank you very much. So let me go back to your point on entrepreneurship. How do we create? So what we are doing, and let me just share that with you, Madan, and I think I will also discuss this with you offline as to how we can take this forward. We in Gothenburg in Sweden had created something called Campax. Campax is a innovation arena where people from multiple disciplines and stages of maturity and competence work together to solve some common compelling problems. So it could be people from regulators, it could be startups, it could be, it has to always start with an anchor industry, a large player, and then opening up doors for startups, young entrepreneurs who otherwise normally would never get into the system of a large company like a Volvo or a large company. So we are repeating the same thing in Bangalore. Very happy to say that we are creating Campax here where we will encourage entrepreneurs, academia, regulators to work together to solve common problems. So we have already decided and we are going to work on number of problems, and this would be inaugurated later in within this quarter, within the month of, so this will be a full-fledged facility which will, so this to my mind would be a very big takeaway from the entrepreneurship. So the concept here is that you need a couple of anchor industries and then around that build a platform of entrepreneurs who can, so, and everybody wins in this game. You increase the, you raise the, enhance the size of the value chain and everybody across that, and you will be surprised that in the trucking industry, the kind of new revenue streams which are getting created as a consequence of this is amazing. It's amazing. So I think that's one. Very, very quickly. Let me go very quickly to the kind of work which we are doing. We have started an academy called Rasta, R-A-S-T-A. Rasta is, here we provide MTech. This is at a higher level, MTech degrees. This is part of the Vishweshwarya VTU University. We have tied up with them. So we provide road and highway engineering. So that's one way of taking the spectrum high on, because infrastructure is going to be a very, very big thing. And we need good road and highway engineers on the upper end of the spectrum. So that's one. And of course, we have these driver and operator training centers where we are partially partnering with GMR also. And we have started a micro enterprise in Hoskote for women. And together with other Swedish companies, I am also the chairman of Swedish Chamber of Commerce in India. We are starting a concept called Craft Samla. Craft Samla is basically something to do again on skilling, but the focus is only on women. So we have trained already about in the Pune belt more than 200 women forklift drivers, and so Maharashtra government signed up with us, and we've done a lot of work there. So I think those are some of the things which we need to do, and we can discuss. We need to form some platforms, and I think Madan, you are the right man. If you can get some of us together, we can join forces to build something which can give much larger and bigger results. So I think that's one, of course. And as you rightly said, during the pandemic time, we did so many things which we never did earlier, distributing groceries to thousands of people. We worked on community development, building toilets and other things. So number of stuff which we have done, which the usual stuff which we all do. But I think very importantly to your point, that how do we create the spirit of entrepreneurship? If each one of us can create 100 entrepreneurs, it is not a very big, it's not a very big number. And I think you need anchor industries, large industries around which, and there the mindset has to change. As Anurag very, very rightly said, a lot of these solutions will come when we change our mindsets of opening the doors wider instead of closing doors and saying, I want to protect my business. I think that is a losing proposition. You got to open the doors wider to really make it matter. So more as we discuss, as we take along. Yeah.
Thank you, Kamal. I think lots of interesting initiatives and thoughts. And as you said, keeping the doors wider open rather than protecting turf is the key that I think the key learning that we all need to take. So Anurag, over to you.
The two, three things, Madan. One is that the whole mindset of parents about child getting a job rather than starting her own. Because if you ask an average parent, they'll say that why to take a risk? Because there are risks attached to it. Who's going to put in the money? And it's better to what's called get on to the job. And it's fact also. It's easier to earn a salary of 30,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees per month than to make a profit of 50,000 rupees every month. Because everyone, if we look at our own catchment of people with whom we work, for them they don't have the patience, and nor we should be expecting them to have the patience, because they are dealing with some of the struggles are very, very important, critical, and they need to respond as quickly as possible. They don't have the patience of, uh, people from our own background, where we can say that yes, I have a buffer for around 3 years. I can have a patience for 3 years to getting the kind of return that I'm expecting. So it requires huge amount of work on the mindset to tell people that what you're creating a legacy which you can, what is called, certainly hand it over, or certainly nurture it, scale it up the way you want to scale it up. That's one. The second is the readiness of the people to allow another businesses to start, readiness to facilitate, encourage, promote, support. And that's not an easy job to do, because it's everyone is busy with their own life, that it's difficult to, what is called, ask them that can you in the sense also mentor people who are in the same stage that as you were 3 years, 2 years back. Third is the whole, I'll say, the investment on creating network and alliances which can deliver these some of these stuff. We had a discussion earlier also, Madan, on this particular topic, and I always say this, that there's a huge amount of effort that needs to be built on building the trust among the members who are there in these networks and these alliances. I have a very unique definition of these networks. I always call these networks are where net is mine, work is your. I'll just net it and I'll talk about it as my work. And that, in the sense, create a huge amount of trust deficit. If you don't work on creating that particular trust between your alliance member, you will never be able to create a ecosystem which can facilitate entrepreneurs to get developed and sustain. Uh, uh, what we are trying to do, and be very honest with you, our focus has been largely on job creation. If I look at my investment, then I'll say 85% of my investment is getting in job creation, and only 15% is getting in the entrepreneurship related stuff. And what we are doing is, in a very limited manner, there are two, three things. One is we have taken last year ambitious agenda to support startups for their scale up mandate. And the whole idea is that can we, through our techno managerial support, can we, through our mentorship, can we, through our business linkages, can we, through our the network that we have, help these startups to get the scale that they are looking for. So I identified 4 of them through a very intensive process, where we had the initial application was more than 100. We did multiple rounds to identify people who had this hunger in their belly to really reach to the next level that they were aiming for, and secondly, who were willing to, what is called, bring in community to share their profit, because you don't want to invest in someone where their interest is only to build their own personal empires rather than looking at options and opportunity to share it with the larger community. So that's one work that we have done. The second work that we have done is, which we have recently launched, it started an idea challenge round, where what we are saying is that we will identify the 10 best ideas. We'll help them for 2 years with, again, with financial and technical managerial support and mentorship support to, what is called, help them develop their POCs and MVPs, so that they can take it to the market and see whether they can run it on their own or not. The third part is again working with some of the organizations, and that's a tougher one because the whole idea is that can we influence the MSME market in some way or the other, where you help people, and this won't be possible only with Capgemini getting involved because we do not have the financial strength to back the interest or the requirement that the MSME will be having. Fortunate that we got some of our financial clients who are or clients who have uh, finance as their key business DNA, who are working with us to look at. Can we train them? Can we make them ready to start their own business? Fund them based on some of the requirements or some of the criteria that these institutions are having, and help them what is called start their own, start the operation on their own, and which in the sense will also enable them to become a job creator rather than looking for jobs only. So these are three work that we are doing, and I can very safely say that going forward, the 80, 50, 85, 15% investment ratio that you see today will change, and it will certainly become 70, 30 or 60, 40 in coming, I'd say 1 or 2 years or so, because we do acknowledge the need and rationale of having a very strong portfolio on entrepreneurship there, because it has the potential of impacting more number of people by transforming one individual and his or her ambition and aspiration that they'll be having. And on the larger side, I'll say that there is a huge requirement where I see both kind of companies should come together, where one is manufacturing, second is service sector. They need to come together, bring in the kind of skill set that they are having. Skill set not necessarily at the abstract level, but it is skill set purely from the employee side, who can then work with these individuals who have the right kind of hunger in their belly to really influence the work that's happening in entrepreneurship. Fifth is we do not have many strong players in this. To be very honest on this, we have many players on scaling. We have many players who are actively pursuing the agenda of skilling people to get on to the next level of job that is getting created. But you don't have too many active players on entrepreneurship. They do not have modules which are tempting enough. I'm playing very with a straight bat. I'm not in the sense right now mincing words when I'll say that we don't have models which are tempting for corporates to really say that, hey, let's work on this. And when I say tempting, it's all about how you're packaging it, how you're pricing it. If you are not pricing it properly, you're not going to get too many takers for that, because it's the whole question of how viable the whole product is. And that's where I strongly feel that the service offering that the NGOs are these days talking about in the skilling, they should certainly also start talking about entrepreneurship and how they can Indianize the service offering. They can't bring in the offering which was good in, I'll say, in for me, if I can use that for example of bringing in one offering from France or bringing in some European offering or from US and then try to get it at India, it won't work. You need to Indianize it. You need to look at our own situation, because their parents may be excited to get their kid get involved in an entrepreneurship program. In India, majority of parents will say that look for a job. It's good for you. नहीं तो the larger argument will be कि पता नहीं मेरा बच्चा क्या कर रहा है.
Correct.
Because they are not very sure of what they are actually doing. Because when they get a job, they can always flaunt it by saying that मेरा बच्चा is working with Volvo or working with FIS or working with Capgemini. But
Exactly.
no one wants to say that they are working with Anurag Enterprises. He started a puncture ki dukaan.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's also about the kind of status that they are looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. No, I thank you for your candid comments, and I think that's the nature that we need to change. I also love. I think we had discussed that, and you said, listen, from a collaborative effort, we need to not just the network, but also leave our egos and logos out, and then figure out what is the
egos
impact.
and logos out.
that I always
And that's a
remember.
copyrighted phrase that I'm asking people to use it, and they need to acknowledge that this was Anurag's saying. Yeah.
Totally, which is why I'm bringing it back to you. If you don't leave your ego and logo, it's a no-go. I've added another one
Yeah,
to
it's a no-go. Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
So, yeah, Venkat, a few minutes reflections from you.
Yeah, sure. So entrepreneurship is a great topic. For me, it is like I keep wondering why I have not become an entrepreneur myself. You know? It's more requiring the ability to sustain a business and run a business by himself, right? So it's not about just investments and just making a person become an entrepreneur. Grooming him to become an entrepreneur is where we focus more from FIS perspective, right? Like what Anurag rightly said, to give that sort of investment and make a person entrepreneur, it requires a lot of investments which may not be sustainable. But grooming him to ensure that he can become an entrepreneur by himself and sustain with some minimum investments and then grow by himself, right? That's where we are focusing around, right? So we, in order to become a larger view of India becoming powerful, we start right from a village. We choose some kids there and invest them in a very early age in grooming them with regard to education and how he grows his career. So when this guy, when he goes back to his village, he parts that knowledge with his family, so that this family becomes knowledgeable. That in turn makes the village knowledgeable, and that's how we grow, right? Choose a wide area and bring up that. So some of the programs we run is adopt a village also, so that we train the villagers. So most of the cases, the villagers have the skill themselves, doesn't know how to convert it into a business model. So they don't need investments also. They have all that required to run a business, but it's just the knowledge how to convert that to business is what would be lagging, right?
Exactly.
So we fill that gap space. We ensure that those things are all focused around. Some of the students we even sponsor to go to US for higher education. So when they come back, so that entire village is gained by the knowledge he's going to come back, right? So you'd be surprised that some of the kids we sponsored had won award from Michelle Obama when Obama was in power, right? So that was the caliber of people who are unnoticed and there in the villages, right? So we invest our time and efforts in these sort of people so that we can groom them to become an entrepreneur subsequently. So as I said, Make in India is anyway going to open up a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs. So it's just the mindset. See, like probably, like I said, I'm not an entrepreneur because I've been groomed telling, okay, IT, you go work for a multinational company, you get right. So to that mindset of getting into an entrepreneurship is what we need to plan to these youngsters so that they can win as an entrepreneur. So that's where FIS is investing.
Wonderful. Yeah. No, lovely to hear your views. And I think, as Kamal was also mentioning, the future of work will become more and more individual based and therefore entrepreneurial based rather than organization based. And that's where the digital world will take us to. And the more we can start laying the foundations of an entrepreneurial society where people are able to take, opportunities and explore them. Rather than waiting for, as I say, waiting for Godot and hoping that somebody else will come and deliver them certain jobs. I think that switch is super critical in this decade. I'm just going through the chat and the comments. I think one of the comments in the chat was around this whole, focusing on decentralized development rather than everybody focusing on urban. And how do we make sure that there is an equitable and rural areas get developed? Any quick comments on that?
Yeah, I think I can speak up for a minute on this.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So Madan, I think this pandemic has opened another opportunity for diversity and inclusivity. And this is basically work from anywhere concept. A A lot of jobs are shifting to maybe smaller towns, tier 2 towns, tier 3 towns, and people are working pretty well. And we have seen this over the last 6 to 7 months, and which means that you can get a lot more development in those areas. Everybody doesn't have to be in a Bangalore or a Pune or a Mumbai or an NCR area. So I think that's one good news. And of course, these are early days. There is always a challenge of working from anywhere in terms of the organization culture which you build. So there are always some paradoxes, but there is one good news that work from anywhere is becoming a reality to a large extent, which means tier 2 towns and smaller, there will be a development all around.
Exactly. Completely with you.
And I'll also add here is that no one wants to ignore rural in that particular sense. If you ask anyone, they'll say that because rural for in all possible sense will give me the cost advantage. But the whole question of the readiness of people to get trained there and willingness to move to urban centers, because that's where the business is. I cannot shift Capgemini, for example. I cannot shift my offices to rural areas because I'm not present there. That's a fact. And what I see these days is, it may be there are multiple options and opportunities for a young person to get trained and get the job close to their homes. But I do see tendency of youth also saying that they are not willing to travel even 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers to the job. And that's where I always say that the jobs are there, but there are people who are ready to train you also. But there should be some readiness from the other side also, because trade-off need to happen from both the sides. It cannot be one-way traffic, and that's one. Second is we'll have to somewhere accept that life was never supposed to be fair. Life was never supposed to be linear. Life was never supposed to give you everything that you desire and wanted. And there are inequalities which exist in this world. Rural urban divides are there, and we can't what is called just close our eyes and say that it doesn't exist. And the fact is that all our offices or most of the offices are there in rural area, urban areas, and that's where their jobs are. We need to make our people also ready to move there. Work from home is a good option, but I'll be also very honest and candid here that it's not going to replace the work from office completely. The work from office will have the prominence there, and for manufacturing industry, you can't operate, you can't manufacture sitting at home. You need to come to the factories there, and in that particular sense, we'll have to what is called be ready to. If we ask all four of us who are sitting there in the panel, we moved from our roots. We are not in the same place where we were when we were born. And we took that particular risk. We came out and came out for realize certain dreams, and the same needs to be, I'll say, shared with the youth who is looking for options and opportunities.
Absolutely makes sense as well. Venkat, in the interest of time, any last comments from you before I wrap this up?
From IT industry perspective, I did touch upon some of the organizations have already started setting up their offices in rural areas. So it was surprised. My own experience in rural areas is I got better bandwidth in rural areas than the cities. So today, probably because of pandemic, everybody working from home in cities, it's choking the band with an apartment with say 500 houses, all 500 are connected and you don't get the bandwidth. So in rural, I got a very good bandwidth. So it's a nice opportunity for me also to work there more than compared to my city home. So it's improving. Like I said, the digital world is improving, and hence every house in India has to have a fiber connected. It's all happening as we speak, right? So once you have the internet available in one corner of the country, the growth cannot be stopped. It is going to happen.
I agree.
Completely with you. I think this has been a fascinating discussion, and I know we can go on for hours because the topic is so broad and we can go as deep as we want. Thank you so much for each of your comments, and trying to kind of summarize the key takeaways from a if I were a young CSR professional listening into this, and if I were to distill out what are the learnings for me, I would probably put, especially from a skills, employment, and entrepreneurship standpoint, I'd probably put the following summary. One is take a systems view. Let's not take a siloed approach. We should try and understand how the system works, and therefore the supply chain linkages forward, backward, etc. is super critical. Otherwise, we are all living in our own wells. Two, let's understand the aspirations of young people and try and leverage that before we can design any program. There is solutions are changing, problem statements are changing, environments are changing. How do we truly understand the customer that we are working for and make sure that whatever we do is catered to that customer, which is the youth in this case? Third, how do we make sure that everything we do is future-proofed, that we are not living in the 90s and the 2000s, but we are actually building for the 2030? And what kind of programs and initiatives must we do that will stand the test of time 5 years hence or 10 years hence, right? And if it means junking some of the older thoughts because and not because just because we've invested so heavily into that, but taking a fresh look, I think that's a critical one. The fourth point is, therefore, aligned to the systems view, is try and be a part of as many collaboratives, collectives as possible, because the problem is so huge that one person or one entity figuring out that we can solve it all by ourselves is grossly mistaken. And that's our experience at UA, the UNICEF initiative that we're all a part of, where we're trying to figure out how do we come together to solve this problem together with the youth at the center of the universe. And lastly, I want to leave with the thought that finally, if you were to reflect on life, it is not about how much money did we earn or how much of meals did I fill my stomach with. I think all that is important. But I think the critical one is, what difference did I make to the world around me? And therefore, can we start looking at skills much beyond jobs and entrepreneurship into youth leadership, right? How can we start looking at every young person as a societal leader who can solve community problems around them? And if we can solve for the leadership conundrum, then I think jobs, entrepreneurial opportunities, everything will fix out by itself. So if we can build from the base and not stop at just jobs, but can we go beyond jobs into youth leadership, I think the world will become a much better place. Maybe these are some of the reflections that I want to leave you with. And to this group, I mean, through India CSR and operation team, I would love to figure out how do we build a collaborative community here, which makes sure that no wheel is ever reinvented. How do we make sure that every ounce of effort that each of us put is additive enough to this larger vision of making every youth a youth leader and ensuring that their pathways to economic opportunities is completely filled up. I think that is the action point that I would love to leave for all of us listening in. I know I've seen a lot of interesting comments from audience on the stuff that they're doing. I've noted them down. I will work with Operation to make sure that any interesting information reaches out at least to this panel. And I'm sure this is just the beginning of a conversation and not the end of it. So with that, thank you so much, Kamal, Anurag, Venkat, and look forward to lots more work and conversations together. And thanks to the India CSR team for pulling us all together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madan, for facilitating.
Thank you, colleagues.
This, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Venkat, Kamal, Apresh, and Rusen also.
Thank you.